This wasn't intended post-reboot to be predominantly a Formula E podcast again, but I found myself unexpectedly enjoying the action and having fun chatting to people on my Discord server, invited addressed in the description by the way, and I thought, why not? So I'm Sascha, and Georgie Mackay had the same thought, and they're with me again. Maybe a little bit because your favourite driver won this time, Georgie?
Yeah, it was a good day for, I'll say, the Cassidy truthers like myself. Just a masterclass from him. It was a really good watch. So yeah, no, I'm more than happy to come back and talk about how my favourite driver put in a fantastic race.
Well, that's brilliant. Nick Cassidy did take the spoils, but with Mortara, Roland and Dennis close behind, it was a defensive masterclass from the Citroën driver, and we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about other motorsport, online and offline, that's catching our attention, including a sim race I was lucky enough to commentate on that raised some money and some smiles. And I'll discuss the Daytona 24 Hours with Georgie and ask them, as their veteran team owner at this stage, for tips and tricks on starting my own sim team. So let's get into it then. So the Mexico City E-Prix, and it was Nick Cassidy's first win for Citroën, but not his first win in Formula E, of course. He's been a contender right from the start with Jaguar and before that Envision. But this one was a tactical masterclass in particular from the New Zealander, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, I think it really came down to how he used his energy. He just sat in what might be referred to as the peloton a few seasons ago, and arguably is sort of coming back already in this second race of the season. Just watching how Cassidy won this race. I think 30% of the way into the race, like the first third through the race, I don't think anybody had used more than 25% energy. You could tell that the energy saving was really crucial to anyone that did well's race, and as well as that, how they chose to deploy their attack mode. Cassidy particularly, he took 6 minutes of attack mode in his first stint of it, and I think initially everybody thought that was a little crazy because it was just after that safety car, and as people say, safety cars, but it worked out for him. He carved his way through the pack and managed to stay at the front. And I think more than just biding his time and scything through the pack, as is seemingly reasonably easy to do in Formula E, especially when you have the benefit of attack mode over a driver that doesn't. You've got 50 kilowatts more and four-wheel drive when they don't, so ostensibly you are going to blow by them. But it was his ability to keep two drivers that had attack mode behind him. I think mostly by backing them into each other. Shades of Lewis and Nico at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in the double points year, but just a fantastic drive all around from Nick, and it was good to see as I say, as a Nick truther. So you'll hear no complaints from me on that one.
Yeah, certainly Cassidy will be one of the contenders for the title. I think he mastered energy usage, I think, better than anyone else in the field. And also, attack mode obviously came into it, but the race was generally an energy race from start to finish. And I guess that was in the main down to that really long start-finish straight. I mean, Formula E was originally, of course, a city street circuit formula, so they didn't have to worry about killing the battery on such a long straight. But as Gen 3's progressed, as the cars have got faster and faster, we almost need to be on these full circuits a lot of the time now. So something like the Hermanos Rodriguez is obviously going to catch out some people, although I think everyone's got wise to it now by the final year of Gen 3, haven't they?
I think, honestly, the Hermanos Rodriguez circuit is fantastic. It's one of the best circuits on the calendar. I think I said that about Sao Paulo as well. But that's just a testament to how much better the Formula E calendar has gotten over the years. Gone are the days where every single race of the season was in an airport in Berlin. And granted that there was reasons for that, but no, a lot of the tracks on the calendar now are fantastic. Particularly the arena section in this layout of what is the Mexican Grand Prix track, but obviously not the Grand Prix layout. It produces some really tight racing. You can always see cars going 2 wide, 3 wide, sometimes even 5 wide, to the chagrin of Dan Ticktum, I think it was, that got pushed off the track. But that's something to be said about these cars as well. Originally, they were racing those street circuits because, as you say, they weren't really designed. They didn't have the oomph behind them to maintain their power down those straights. So the tracks that they raced on had to be selected and picked accordingly. But now the cars are they're monsters. They're only getting more and more powerful with every generation. I wouldn't be surprised if we started to see them, maybe not the next generation, but the generation after that, on full-size Grand Prix circuits. I don't know if that's necessarily the right move for the championship, but definitely tracks like Interlagos that only really has one particularly long straight, and granted the other one that is relatively long is downhill, so I think that's probably going to help the electric motor, but one particularly long uphill straight, yeah, I could absolutely see more powerful, slightly larger batteried versions of these cars racing at places like Interlagos.
Yeah, and we'll come to Interlagos later on, another classic racing circuit from the old days, but still hosting great racing, as will...
It was almost a good segue, wasn't it?
It will be a good segue, I promise you. Yeah, so Edo Mortara finished second behind Nick Cassidy, and we will talk about him, but worth pausing to commiserate for his teammate Nick de Vries. Obviously was the villain of the piece last time out, pumped Mortara off at the first corner, but this time around de Vries didn't even get a chance to affect the race at all. Started from the back and ended up pulling out with some kind of technical issue. The way I saw it as I looked at the replay, it looked as though he pulled off the track, then pulled slightly on. And I did wonder if maybe that was the motorsport equivalent of a footballer getting injured and making sure he's lying on the pitch. Maybe noticing his teammate was in second, pulling a safety car. I wouldn't suggest such a thing, but it does make you wonder, you know?
When I was watching it, I thought exactly the same thing watching it. It really did look like, because he was comfortably off the track and then he just put the car back on it. And I know the area that he was in was an off-track area, so the camera angle made it look significantly worse. But what he did do still effectively was put himself on the trajectory of a car that would miss its braking marker. So he's put his car back in an unsafe position. He was comfortably out of the way. The marshals rather, would have been able to get the car out of the way, and then he puts it just back over that white line, and I thought that was a little bit cheeky, especially from someone that's supposed to be a world champion. You mentioned that he was sort of the villain of the piece last week, or last round, but I don't think he really did anything to dissuade that by doing that, to be honest. I don't think he had much of a race to redeem himself either as a result of it, but certainly pulling off of the track and then back on it, seemingly, I wouldn't accuse him of trying to bait a safety car, but it's difficult to understand why you would do that and for any other reason, if you know what I mean. Like, I'm not gonna outright accuse the guy of trying to bait a safety car for his teammate, but
oh no. But I just wonder if maybe he'd been watching the F1 movie a bit too much or something.
Yeah, it was a little boneheaded, was where I'll leave that, I think.
I mean, Nick de Vries, as we mentioned before, is a Formula E world champion. Okay, it tends to get dismissed because people tend to say, well, yes, but, yes, but he took advantage of the last year of an incredibly unfair qualifying system and really gamed that. But then on the other hand, you've got to beat what's in front of you, and he did. And yet it just seems like after that F1 experience, his career has kind of flatlined in a way. And is it just as simple as, it's like a footballer, maybe going to Man United too early in their career and then ending up at Stoke and, maybe losing some of that spark? Or is it just about purely luck or positions, or what is it?
I think a better analogy would have been managers going to Man United the way that they're going at the moment.
Yeah.
Per Ruben Amorim, he's a bit of a fall guy, I think. But anyway, the less said about that, the better. With de Vries, it has been bizarre to see sort of the crumbling of not only his sort of mentality around driving, as he took at least a year out to pursue his law career, if I remember correctly, but then coming back and sort of. And again, I'm not a professional racing driver. No, I'm not going to sit here and even remotely expound the idea that I could do a better job. But he just does seem to look like he's forgotten how to drive a little bit, doesn't he? Especially when you bring it back to like what we were just talking about, him driving the car back onto the track after having driven it off the track. It's just a little bit silly. I don't really know what's gone on with him. And I'll put my hand up and say that I was a big fan of Nick de Vries when he first came over to Formula One, and as he won Formula E. I thought this is the guy, and I think I said this in the last podcast as well, that he was, for me, the guy that I thought, yeah, someone can make the jump from Formula E and make it work in Formula One, but it just didn't pan out that way, and it does seem to have affected him in the long term. I don't know if it's something about the mentality of Formula One but even then, you see the racing in Formula E, especially with that 5 wide moment. It's ruthless. If there's any gap, there's a car in it. The cars are so close to each other, way closer than Formula One could even dream of nowadays, the way that Formula E cars follow each other through corners. So I don't know. It's really difficult to put my finger on, as not necessarily a real life driver, as I say, or as we say in sim, the cars might not be real, but the racing is, as in theory, a racing driver. It's difficult to explain. It's kind of hard to watch a little bit as well, as I say, as a previous De Vries fan, but also just as a fan of the sport. You never really like to see anybody going backwards in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that maybe he needs some kind of a mental reset. When I look at how Mortara's doing in that Mahindra were marked out as title contenders for this final season of Gen 3, and I think that Mortara lacks consistency, but if he surprises us, he could be. De Vries was supposed to be the second piece of that puzzle. He was supposed to be the second part of not exactly a super team, but certainly a very good team. The trouble is, a bit like another driver that we'll mention in a minute, 2 retirements, or rather 2 non-point scoring finishes, and doesn't look good already. But you wanted to talk a bit about the contacts under yellow, and so it's twice now, as you say, that there's been a full course yellow, and then there's been some kind of damage under full course yellow. Is it something about Formula E, specifically the adrenaline that it produces, or maybe the way that people are forced to drive, that causes this kind of contact under yellow? Because, yeah, you're absolutely right. You'd hardly ever get in IndyCar or NASCAR, for example.
I think it does, to an extent, go back to what we were just saying about how aggressive the racing is in Formula E and how close the cars are to each other. And you can look, you don't even really have to look any further than the UK Highway Code for an example of why these things happen. Is if you are trailing a car and they slam the brakes on, there's a finite distance between them and you for you to stop your car. And depending on how fast you're going, will result on how long that distance is. A, by how long it takes to stop the car physically via the frictional brakes, or in the case of the Formula E cars, via their magnetic brakes and their frictional brakes. But also how long it takes you as a human being to recognize that you need to press the pedal, and for your brain to send the signal to your foot, and then for your foot to move to the appropriate pressure of pedal input. It's the thinking distance. And stopping distance is the total distance of thinking distance and braking distance. Something that I think we're all taught when we learn how to drive, or certainly we are in the UK. If you have, everyone does the theory test, and that's a major part of the theory test. In Formula E, they're following so closely to each other. I think they're eliminating thinking distance, and because there's so many cars in such close proximity, usually that wouldn't be a problem if it was 1 or 2 cars. It was just one car up another car's butt, then that would be fine. They'd be able to lift off, pull a little bit of a gap, and then they'd have a safety cushion. But when you see cars in Formula E go 3 wide into a corner, 4 all up the front and back of each other, how is the car in the middle supposed to do anything when the race director comes over the radio and says full course yellow in 3, 2, 1? How is the car in the middle supposed to know? Well, the guy in front of me, he's gonna lift. Guy in the back of me, I'm gonna have to knock him. It's just part and parcel of how close the cars are running, and that's sort of a problem. They've got I think the opposite problem of Formula One, where the Formula One cars can't really run that closely to each other, and it's been a problem they've had for a very long time. One of the things that Formula E has is the opposite, where the cars can run so close to each other that it's almost becoming dangerous when they have to neutralize the race. I think they're going to have to try and figure something out there, but I'm not really sure how they would do that, other than having some sort of manual override in the steward's booth that allows them to manually slow down all of the cars themselves, but that would inevitably lead to problems as well. because not every car is in exactly the same situation, and if you reduce its power, you might spin someone out of a corner. It's going to be a difficult one. It's a difficult, and it's almost a funny issue to have because it's a result of such close racing, as I say, I think. But yeah, it'll be an interesting problem to see them try and solve.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it will be interesting to see if we end up missing the close racing of Gen 3 when we move up to Gen 4. Obviously, none of us have seen the cars in testing yet. We have no idea what they're going to behave like. We have heard, though, that they're significantly faster, and indeed they're now faster than GT3 in sports car racing. That does mean that you've got the potential for it to be a bit like when Formula One became wider and larger and faster in 2017. And that's arguably put the racing back, even though the cars were much better looking. But, that's for the future, I guess. And something for the now is the Citroën team. So Citroën obviously won the race with Nick Cassidy, and they look to have got off to a flying start. Some speculation from Sam Smith on the race, who is obviously always reliable on Formula E matters, that they may have had a helping hand, though, from circumstances and from the organisation of Formula E itself. So Citroën took over from the Monaco Sports Group, which ran the Maserati team for Stellantis last year and previously in Gen 3. But Citroën is a totally different organisation. It is still a Stellantis powertrain team, but they've basically taken over central control of that team from MSG. MSG ran out of money, essentially, so Formula E operations took over the running of MSG. And that meant that the team was effectively frozen and was in the control of the organisers. For the good of the sport, essentially, Stellantis, Citroën were kind of incentivized to enter with that second team, along with DS Penske. So Citroën were given the chance to recruit from other teams. They were given the chance to essentially, other teams believe, enter on a slightly better footing than the rest of the field. And considering how the previous team ended up in a financial hole, that's obviously not something that rival teams are always going to spout sour grapes. That's what they've always done in Formula One, in every other form of motorsport. We even saw that a little bit in sim racing yesterday, although we don't need to talk about that per se. But rival teams are always going to try and get at people. But how much of this Citroën story do you think is hot air and how much of it has some truth to you?
I think it's funny that on both sides of motorsport, virtual and physical, there are companies that can be acronymized to MSG that are out of money. It's just a little apropos of nothing there. Yeah, the way that Citroën have been treated going into this new season, I can sort of understand why a few of the teams have had a little bit of sour grapes by it, but to be honest, I think it's far too hard for new teams to join motorsports nowadays, especially in these series that aren't homologated in the same way as, say, GT3, GT4, TCR, where you're buying a customer car from someone. In these top level series, that's what Formula E, Formula One, World Endurance Championship in the higher categories of LMDH, IMSA with the GTP prototypes. GTP prototype, that's a tautology. The P in GTP means prototype. But anyway, I think it's hard enough for new teams to join these sports and carve out a niche for themselves in it. I often go back to Formula One in 2010, where it admitted those 3 new teams, and none of them exist anymore because they were all subject to a budget cap that no one else was, and ultimately couldn't make any money on not really being allowed to perform. In a roundabout way, it's reasonably refreshing to see a championship the level of Formula E give so much help to a new team, what is ostensibly a new entry, especially when you look at, again, to make the comparison to Formula One, or how much Formula One battled against allowing a new team in it. The way that they effectively said, no, Andretti, we don't want you. Unless you're Cadillac, then we'll have you, even if there's ostensibly nothing really that different between your entry. Just call yourselves Cadillac. I know that's boiling it. That's dramatically oversimplifying it. There is an engine deal in there as well, but that's kind of how it looked on the outside of things. It was really petty to a new team that was only trying to succeed.
there's some doubt over the engine deal as well. People are talking about it being a Ferrari deal for a lot longer than we think.
Yep. And like as I say, that were Citroën expected to come in immediately with their own powertrain, not a Stellantis powertrain, but a Citroën separate from Stellantis powertrain? No, they weren't, because that would be dramatically unrealistic. And I think to an extent it is good for the sport to help a new team on its stepping stones into the sport. But I mean, the recruiting drivers from other teams thing, they have a super team over at Citroën. I've said this in the last podcast
recruiting
as
drivers,
well.
recruiting engineering staff as well, apparently.
You know, it sort of makes sense how that team's performing so well as they are, as early as they are, because as I say, even just to look at the drivers, they've got the winningest driver by percentage in the sport and the 2-time world champion. They have a super team, so I could definitely understand why a lot of the other teams could feel some sour grapes towards it. But ultimately, I think we're in a point in motorsport at the moment where a lot of people think that we're too hard on drivers when they first get into these categories. We look at Nick de Vries getting kicked out in the first 5 or 6 races, I think it was. The same for Jack Doohan, the same for Pierre Gasly being shuffled out of the Red Bull. It's a cutthroat environment in top-level motorsport at the moment. And it's almost refreshing to see a series actually try and help one of its newer teams succeed.
Yeah, and obviously Citroën sharing the same powertrain as DS shouldn't come as any surprise, given that Formula E's rules allow for 2 teams to share powertrains. And in fact, Porsche share it between 3 teams, because there's Porsche, there's Andretti, and there's Cupra Kiro, although with a slightly older powertrain than the other 2. So it does happen, and it's all part of the customer arrangement. I think, yeah, the difference is that Citroën have got off to such a flying start, and it's kind of put the microscope on them where it may not have been previously. But certainly excellent performance from Cassidy and Citroën, and also not a bad performance, certainly a good recovery drive considering the first race went very badly for him, from Edoardo Mortara, my personal favourite, and Mahindra. What kind of a driver is Edoardo Mortara? I remember the first year I covered Formula E, it was season 5. He was driving for Venturi at that time, or Venturi, as I'm supposed to call them apparently. And he basically scored really, really good points or retired. And it was pretty much the same deal in his 2022 title shot as well, when he was also at Venturi. So he was alongside Degrassi for that season, and they did have a couple of high profile comings together, which maybe explains why Degrassi kind of seemed like he was considering that a sort of 1-year season on loan before he went back to Abt. But anyway, so Mortara, he's a driver who's either on it or very much off it. Is that ever going to translate into a title charge, or do we just need to, think of it a bit like Jimi Hendrix? Some exciting guitar solos, but also a bunch of stuff you might skip through.
I'm gonna mention a driver that I would liken Edo Mortara to from Formula One and further afield. This man has had a fantastic career, I will say. I do not say this as a negative to Edo Mortara, but I think you'll know what I mean when I say it. Kamui Kobayashi.
I love Kamui Kobayashi. Can we talk about him, please?
Fantastic as well. He drove for my favorite team, Caterham, by the way. That's the kind of person you're talking to.
If you're a Caterham fan, you must be some kind of masochist.
There's a Caterham flag on the wall, and just next to my rig, actually. But
did you break into the Leafield factory like all those YouTubers and steal it?
No, but I did hypothesize at the time that if I turned up at the Leafield factory wearing my Caterham Formula One polo shirt, nobody would question me. There must have been at least one other fan, But to get back to Edo Mortara, that's sort of where I see him. Kamui Kobayashi was a fantastic driver in Formula One. He had some incredible races, but he was never really a title contender in any realistic way in any of his seasons. Even when he eventually did win that one race, fantastic race for him. you go further afield, you go to World Endurance Championship, and he is a winning driver. He is a championship winner. I don't necessarily know if Formula E is the place for Edoardo Mortara, but I think he'll have his day somewhere.
And, well, he has had his day for Audi and DTM and sports cars as
Exactly.
well. He's obviously a very experienced driver and very nice person as well, which is part of the reason why I like him so much. But yeah, thing about Mortara is he is always going to have the speed, and he seems to have the backing of a team that loves him and wants him to succeed right now. And he's obviously carving out a season now which marks him out as clear number one to be, favoured in the later races if it continues the way it is. And obviously, I say jokingly, he had help from his teammate in the first race, so he's what's not to like, essentially. But yeah, I do feel like he's got these great peaks in him and sometimes great troughs. Kamui Kobayashi, though, yes, quick word for him, because I remember when he came into Formula One with Toyota, he was a reserve driver because, gosh, was Ralf Schumacher injured? I think he was, wasn't he? Or Timo Glock was dropped, or was it? No, it was before that. Ralf Schumacher was injured, and Kobayashi came in, and he pulled off all these gonzo manoeuvres round the outside of corners in Suzuka that no one else knew you could overtake on.
Yep.
And that was pretty much the start of a career that went on in the same way. It's kind of surprising for me that he's turned into such a good team principal for Toyota in sports car racing, because it's a little bit like, footballing tearaway Craig Bellamy becoming a good manager of Wales, to be honest. It feels like almost the poacher becomes the excellent gamekeeper somehow.
I've got all of the faith in the world in Kobayashi and what he's doing over at Toyota. To be honest, I wouldn't even put it past him getting in the car himself when it comes back, and I think he'd still be able to hold his own against all of those fresh faces that they've got in the car. Maybe that's where Mortara should go. Maybe Mortara should try and get himself into the Toyota, the LMDH program. I think that would be a fantastic opportunity for him. I think he'd do really well in it as well, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll talk about sports cars later, but Toyota's got a new hypercar for the new season, and I think every driver in the world who maybe has the space in their contract will be looking to get into the Toyota, although rumour has it they, like many of the hypercar teams, are only looking at drivers who are willing to be exclusive now.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing happened, I believe, for Stoffel Van Dorn at Genesis, which is why he's now just reserved for Jaguar, unfortunately. But anyway, yeah, so Mortara, great result, and he was even in with a shout until his attack mode ended of passing Cassidy, although I think Cassidy was on such a defensive fire that he was never going to be passed, was he?
No, I think one thing that played a really pivotal role, and it was the lap 25 contact between Mortara and Dennis, that just allowed Nick to keep backing them up that little bit longer for him to not have to worry for them both being attack mode anymore. He just hit his marks, apexes and exits. It was perfect, textbook driving. No one's getting around you if you're going to get a better exit than them at every single corner. It was perfect defensive driving, and being able to back them into each other was Nick's way of effectively saying, hey, neither of you are passing me. You can fight with each other if you want to, though. And it was wonderful to see, especially, as I said, he didn't have attack mode at the time. So he was at a power deficit. He was at two-wheel drive compared to both of them being on four-wheel drive. It was just really, really solid apexes and exits driving.
Yeah. And well, someone else who I think is certainly showing a few people up on that grid. We talked about him last week, and I'm so impressed with Taylor Barnard. This week, the driver he showed up was Sebastian Buemi, big time at the first corner, but Buemi just outbraked himself. It's the kind of thing that Buemi never blames himself for doing, but I had a feeling he was probably rolling out his dirty, dirty man catchphrase from season 3, which he used on Daniel Abt in Montreal. But Barnard's shown up a lot of older, more experienced drivers and shown really that it doesn't matter what age you are. If you've got composure, you can do whatever you want. He finished 5th today, and he obviously had a chance of the win. But DS Penske, they've obviously got that Stellantis powertrain as well. Barnard has, earned that seat through great performances with McLaren for 2 years. What do you make of his chances of rolling this into some kind of a title challenge?
Honestly, I think it's him and Nick at the moment. Not necessarily this season. Certainly going forward, I think Taylor Barnard is a name that we're going to be seeing again and again for race wins, for pole positions. He's just, we said it the last round. He's got what it takes, and he seems to to know that, and B, the most important thing, to be okay with it. A lot of drivers crumble under the pressure when they not only have the pace but understand that they have the pace and understand they're in a winning position. They can sort of collapse. I mean, we're seeing that at the moment with, to go back to Nick de Vries, man is a world champion and can't put a race together right now. And yet we have Taylor Barnard, who is the consummate professional on the grid, and I think it won't be long. Maybe it could be this season. It certainly won't be long until we see him challenging for, if not winning, world championships. He's going to be a Formula E world champion. I have no doubt about that.
We'll conclude our Formula E bit in a minute with what will probably turn into a regular segment, Tictum Corner. But first of all, something which is a bit more serious. Last time around, we talked about Pepe Marti and his attempts to completely turn yellow flag rules on their head, which thankfully didn't end up with any serious injuries. But this time it's brake-by-wire issues. Now, I remember covering the Mortara brake-by-wire incident at the start of Gen 3 on the previous iteration of this podcast. And the thing that I said was, it was interesting that it got as far as him being able to go straight on and end up with concussion, because it seemed like, I mean, Formula E had talked a good game about brake safety. They'd discussed how there was a manual override. Unfortunately, the manual override didn't work on that occasion the way that Mortara had wanted it to. And there was something, if I recall, about the first lap, about not all the systems engaging usually in the first lap because of regen not kicking in, essentially. But twice cars had brake-by-wire issues in free practice. De Grassi had an incident where he went straight on at turn 1, although this probably explains why a lot more circuits are, what you would call old-fashioned racing circuits, because they have runoff areas. And De Grassi went off into what would have been, the escape road, what would have been the F1 first corner. So he was fine, and he didn't damage the car, but looked a bit tricky for him at the time, at least according to Zach Evans on the Discord server, who was watching FP1 on Friday night. Antonio Felix da Costa in the Jaguar had to sit out FP2 because of a brake-by-wire issue, and it's obviously commendable that Formula E are essentially saying, no, you've got to retire the car as soon as they find a brake-by-wire issue on the computers. It is something that seems to have dogged Gen 3 throughout this generation, and I really hope that they have a completely new system in Gen 4, and potentially a manual override that resolves the issue if brake-by-wire isn't working properly, because it's never good to have to retire a car from a session, although obviously Da Costa went on to qualify, and it's disruptive, but apart from anything else, it makes the sport less safe than you would like.
Yeah, no, when brake-by-wire was first being talked about for things like Formula One, because they spoke about it years ago, and Formula E, I was sort of speculative of it for these sorts of reasons. For it's the wrong way to say mechanical failure, because it's an electrical failure by definition. But by the same token, mechanical failures happen with brakes as well. We see that in motorsport all the time. It was a little bit concerning to see two in one weekend, or in 2 sessions, I think it was. But yeah, no, brake failures, ultimately they are part and parcel of motorsports. I'm sure they're changing the brake pads and discs and etc. out every single race, potentially even multiple times a weekend. So there's not, I mean, if they do have these issues, then absolutely they're getting changed out along with the system that operates them. They're having software flashes, firmware flashes, all of those kinds of things. But it's a scary reality of what motorsport is. It's a reminder that ultimately these spots are people hurling themselves around in very heavy and very deadly boxes at very high speeds, and things can go wrong. Just like in mechanical cars with mechanical or frictional braking systems, obviously the Formula E cars do have frictional braking systems, but it's the same with anything. Anything can go wrong. as I say, it is slightly concerning that a couple did go wrong at the same time, but it is ultimately just, in my view, part of motorsport. Brake failures happen, and that's because of the way that these systems are being stressed at speed. We can't expect every single part to work perfectly every single time it's stressed. Eventually, something's going to give, and it seems like that at the moment that's the brake-by-wire system, which isn't great, but it there's so many worse things that could go wrong on the car, particularly the survival shell failing, for example, or the roll hoop failing. We don't see any of those issues happen, and importantly, we only see these we have so far only seen these brake-by-wire issues happen in practice sessions. So it means they're getting on top of it by the time the race comes round and by the time the cars are being driven in anger. And I think that's probably the most important thing for me to see, is that we haven't seen any of these issues in a race. And that's not to say that they couldn't happen, but it does seem, as you say, Formula E are taking this issue so seriously to say, look, you cannot run the car. You have to retire. You've had this issue. You have to fix it, and then you can come back. And I think that's the right approach for them to be taking towards it at the moment.
Yeah, and it brings back some really tough memories from that race. I think it was Diriyah in the first season of Gen 3, because when Mortara went off in practice, I remember he didn't move in the car for about 10 minutes, and I'm not suggesting that this is what I thought. Thoughts crossed my mind anyway, relating to 1994 F1, for example.
Absolutely.
And Formula E, I think the broadcast crew did what they should have done, which was to talk about it, but not film it. But it led to a severe lack of info for fans, particularly fans of that driver, for some time. But thankfully, all came out of it fine, and Formula E doing exactly the right thing by pulling any cars that seem to have the issue before they develop it. Yeah, well, let's move on, and let's move on to a sport, an area of motorsport with arguably much better driving standards and unarguably much sharper stewarding. I'm talking, of course, about the world of sim racing, and particularly the Road to a Cause 2026 began with the 4 Hours of Sao Paulo online at the weekend. It was organised by Prismatic Motorsports, and, congratulations and props to them. So, Road to a Cause 26, maybe it's better if you explain the reason why we've got these 3 preliminary rounds, all standalone races, not adding to a championship, but all to give teams a chance to really get some training in, but also to do some other things before the big race for a Cause 24, which is the charity Le Mans sim race, which happens every year in April. So, yeah, talk us through the thinking behind having those early races first of all, Georgie.
So 2 years ago, when we ran the first Race for a Cause, which was done in aid of Rainbow Railroad, we broadcasted it on our own platform on the Prismatic Motorsports Twitch channel. It was fantastic. We did really well. It raised about $1,700 for the charity, and we're really, really happy with it. Into the second year, we wanted to try and be a little bit more ambitious with it, and we wanted to look at getting it broadcasted by a more respectable broadcaster. And we thought, why not shoot for the moon? Why not try and get the industry-leading broadcaster RaceSpot on board? And based on the first year of Race for a Cause, our partners and our existing sponsors, they believed in the vision of Race for a Cause, and they said, yeah, let's do this. And they put the money up to fund the second year of Race for a Cause. We broadcasted that on RaceSpot. We reached a significantly larger audience. I don't have the numbers to hand, but we also raised a significantly larger amount of money, and that I do have to hand. That was closer to 6,100 euros, which is probably nowadays closer to $7,000, just off the top of my head. So when we put that into context and we basically raised 4 times as much just by changing who the broadcaster was from ourselves to an industry leader. And ultimately, that is what spawned Road to a Cause. For a very long time, our community, the teams that take part in the Race for a Cause 24, they were begging us for more races. When's the next one? When's the next one? When's the next one? And we thought that this was as good an opportunity as we would get to give them some more racing, which is partially why, as you highlight, there's no league structure to this. It's 3 events. It's 3 one-off events that lead up to the main one. Part of it is to give our community the racing that they've been asking us for. But part of it is that we've, for the first time, charged an entry fee to one of these events. Previously, every entry fee has been directly a donation to the charity itself on the charity campaign for the Race for a Cause races in the previous 2 years. But this time we've taken an entry fee for the Road to a Cause. And that being said, we're still not going to benefit from any of that money because 100% of that is being spent on the charity by virtue of it being spent on the broadcast that will be used to advertise the charity to raise money for them. So 100% of the entry fees from Road to a Cause are going in the pot towards paying for that same broadcast. Once again, we're aiming for an industry leader along the lines of Race Spot, and we'll see what we can get when we come out of the funding cycle for it, but we're going really well at the moment. We have a few very interested parties on board to talk about funding some more of it, but ultimately that's what it's about. It's about just trying to give the community what they've been begging us for, while also trying to ensure the long-term success and just survival of the Race for a Cause, the Le Mans 24 charity race that we put on, as you say. We believe in it. That's why we've been putting it on for, this will be its 3rd running now on, as the date was announced at the weekend there. It's the 4th to 5th of April, Easter weekend. We'll announce the charity that we'll be supporting at the next round of Road to a Cause, which is on the 8th of February, and whatever partners that we have for the event will be announced on the 8th of March for the final round of Road to a Cause at Circuit of the Americas. But ultimately, as I said, that's what the Road to a Cause was set up in aid of, was to be the road to the Race for a Cause, to give everyone what they wanted, to provide just people what they were asking for. But Race for a Cause has always had a history of being a very open and accessible environment in sim racing, and these 3 warm-up races, if that's how some people want to think of them, they're more than welcome to think of them that way. If this is training for the main event, this is training for the main event. If this is an excuse to hang out with your friends on a Sunday afternoon and partake in your hobby, that's what it is. Ultimately, it's a space where everyone knows what they're there to do, and that's to raise money for the charity in the long run. And I think everybody seems happy to do that as well.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And just to fill in a few gaps for any viewers, listeners who haven't taken part in either this race or watched this race before. So Race for Cause 24 is a 24-hour race at Le Mans, very much like the Le Mans 24 Hours itself, except a sim race, and running the same cars, running the same rules, running the same cars with a few novelty additions sometimes. Someone took the supercar Camaro and basically ran it as if it was the Garage 56 Camaro that Jenson Button raced at Le Mans a few seasons ago. Someone else took a 2006 Racing Ford GT and put that in 2 years ago. So you always get the odd oddball entry, and it's nice to see them, but it is essentially a very serious sim race with very serious people in hypercars, LMP2 and GT3. And to that note, it's really nice to see the same competitors and some new ones as well trying things in LMP2, GT3 and LMP3, which I never liked when I used to watch IMSA, but it's been a really welcome addition, I think, to sim racing on this occasion, LMP3. iRacing obviously throws up some strange variations in terms of the LMP3s are a lot closer to the LMP2s than they would be in real life, but I think the LMP drivers didn't have a problem with that, did they?
Speaking as one of those LMP3 drivers, certainly not. We ran Prismatic. We ran in a series over the course of this year called the European Sports Car Championship. It's a fantastic league. If anybody's looking for one, really, really fun. It's set up in the style of the ELMS calendar. They have the virtual safety cars and everything. Give it a try if you're looking for a league. They had a significant balance of performance applied to the LMP3 car, which at the beginning of the season was around, I think, 150 kilograms. Towards the end of the season, it ended up being more around 55, 75. But that made it very, very hard to pass the GT3s in that series if you were an LMP3 driver, because you just didn't have the straight line speed anymore. Which is to say that the GT3s, even in Road to a Cause, which all three classes were completely unbalanced, they were just the way that the iRacing simulator pops them out straight out of the oven. The LMP3s were still struggling on some of the straights with some of the GT3s. Particularly, I noticed the BMW would always cruise back up past me while on the straight, and I think, to mention another podcast in a similar sphere, the Simcast team, I remember them cruising up the inside of me once when I was making a pass on, bizarrely enough, a slower LMP2 as an LMP3 driver. To then have a GT3 driver throw it up my inside was very bizarre. It was like a complete inversion of the class structure, but something Marks might have dreamed of. But no,
but
big fan of these LMP3 cars in sim racing. They have a nice little niche between LMP2 and GT3 when they're not, ESCC, when they're not horribly bopped.
So for the first Race to a Cause 24, because it was very much an all hands on deck effort, and because I offered, I was given the chance to commentate alongside a bunch of other people, and it was so much fun. I have to admit, in 2025, when you got all professional and found top line broadcasters, I'd feel a bit mildly peeved that you didn't want my solo 3 a.m. ramblings, but it is what it is. And I watched along and enjoyed it and donated. And you even got some huge names in sim racing, like Jimmy Broadbent driving in last year's race. So clearly the boost in profile was exponential, and well done to yourself and to the charities you've supported. They're always charities that support the trans and LGBT plus community, and from that point of view, it's definitely something that I think everyone in the community in and adjacent to Prismatic can get on board with for obvious reasons. But it's a great thing for anyone to get involved with, and obviously Prismatic Motorsports would love for you to follow them on Twitch and Blue Sky and Instagram, so you can keep getting updated on the races. Tell us when the next one is, because it's the 4 Hours of Fuji, and it's also on a Sunday, but I think it's in 3 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, so the 4 Hours of Fuji is on the 8th of February, and the lights will go out for the start of the race at around 3 p.m. UK time. So if we will be broadcasting it on the Prismatic Motorsports Twitch channel, but we do have something coming up before that, and arguably, bizarrely enough, seeing as we are the ones running the Road to a Cause, it's going to feel weird to say this, but arguably the most important race of the year, the Daytona 24, which comes up this Saturday, Sunday.
Oh yeah, of course. And I did want to talk to you about Daytona IRL and find out who you were looking forward to seeing, who you thought was in with a chance. But let's talk about the sim part of it first. So how many cars are Prismatic running in the virtual Daytona, and in what classes?
So far, I only know of 2, which usually we'll run 2 or 3. To be honest, it often ends up we'll have 1 in each class, but I haven't seen the same interest from our team members in the GT3 classes this year. That's maybe just because, as you say, we've all been driving prototypes so much, we might just be a little bit too set in our ways at the moment for anything with a bit less downforce. So I will be driving an LMP2 along with another director of the team, Roxy Gibson, and our head coach, Rachel Konkoly, our resident Hungarian alien, one of our many, many resident Hungarian aliens at this point. I don't know what they put in the water over there. But in addition to that, we have Ivory, Garnet, Scout, and Izzy running a GTP car. I think they're running the Porsche GTP, and they are definitely going to be ones to watch. They are relatively higher rated, I think, than my Roxy and Rachel's team, so they probably will end up in a higher split than us. For those that don't know, in iRacing races, we can only have a maximum of 60 cars in a race because of the way that the servers handle the amount of cars for races. I don't think anybody's computer could really run that many more on iRacing's 2008 spaghetti code. So when they're there's more than 60 cars signed up for an event, the event splits into 2 splits. And each car, say there's 62 cars entered, there'll be 31 in each, or however many divided by how many multiples there are. The Daytona 24 tends to be the most popular event of the year, and there can be over 40 or 50 splits at any given time for any of the time slots. So even a very small deviation in the rating of your team, every driver having their own driver rating and the team's rating being a composite of everyone in the team. If you have one driver that's a couple hundred I rating lower, which is it's basically an ELO rating system similar to chess. If you have someone that's a couple hundred lower, although using terms like a couple hundred, it's significantly more inflated than chess, you will find yourself in a lower split. I'm around 2,100. I think Rachel's around 3,500, so she's going to drag me up massively. But I think Roxy, who took a little bit of a break from sim racing recently, I think she's hovering around 1,900. So she'll bring us back down a little bit again, and we'll probably average out somewhere around 2,500, which would be a really good place for us to race. I imagine have a really competitive race as a result of that. And that's, to be honest, one of the best things about iRacing's approach to sim racing when it comes to online racing. The true skill system, the iRating system that they have does tend to generate quite exciting races, especially in these special events when there are so many splits and the skill gap, the skill spread in these splits is so tight. You do tend to get some quite exciting racing. So we're looking forward to that.
I remember, I imagine you will be screening this on your Twitch as well, on the Prismatic Motorsports Twitch.
That's the plan. I'm not sure how we're going to manage both teams being run at the same time and broadcasting both of them. Maybe only one of them will be broadcasted and we'll have periodic updates about the other one through their race, but we'll figure it out. There'll definitely be at least one of the teams will be streamed over the course of the weekend, I would imagine.
So I imagine all of your focus on Daytona is on the virtual race rather than the IRL IMSA race. Do you have any thoughts on Daytona in real life as the sports car season takes off? I must admit, I never pay a massive amount of attention to Daytona because most of my eyes are on the European sports car season, but it's so exciting and it's so much fun, and I do love to see those cars going around the oval and then having the challenge of the infield section. It feels like a real setup challenge, and you tend to get some moonlighters. You tend to get some European moonlighters, for the factory teams, maybe for like a Porsche affiliated GT3 team or something. It's just fun, and there's always someone to support.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of this time of year in motorsport. I've joked before that it's sort of like my Christmas time. And it comes around again when the Sebring 12 and 1000 kilometer come around, when they're both around at the same time. But that's like Christmas in July, if you'll allow me to extend the joke. The Daytona 24, it's something special. It's up there with the Le Mans 24 hours, the buzz around the event. It's more than just the event itself. We have the roar around the 24 hours in real life, and there's of course the roar in iRacing, which is the 2.4 hour long race with GT4s, touring cars, and LMP3s. Of course, doesn't exist in real life. That's not a real race that's ran, but we have as much a build up to our 24 as the real 24 has to theirs in theory. To be honest, in terms of the real one, yes, you're right. I've been focusing more on our own race, but as a Cadillac fan, I'll be thinking the same thing I thought last year. God, I hope we don't bin it again. There's no dentists this year to take anybody out, so hopefully that goes a bit better for the Cadillac garages this year.
Sadly or luckily, LMP3 has been extinguished from IMSA, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think even LMP2's gone now as well, except they keep maybe LMP2 for a couple special events like the Daytona 24 hours to pad out the grid. But
yeah, but isn't that because the FIA and the ACO are planning a new LMP2 or something?
Yes, yeah. There is there is a new LMP2 homologation spec that's been released, and they are building towards those, I think, for 2027. There are already new LMP3s as well, and that's another reason that the old car was phased out, was because it was a really old car. But the new LMP3s are coming in as well into things like ELMS. Yeah, no, I think it'll be good to see the LMP2s on track again, because I have missed them.
Yeah. The final thing I wanted to talk about before I let you go, Georgie, is now a while back I watched the legendary documentary Noel's Le Mans Dream. It was a BBC documentary in the late 90s where Noel Edmonds tried to put together a team for Le Mans. In the end, he ended up jumping on the back of the existing Dave Price racing team as they used the Paynos. But yeah, I mean, he at least got his name in the history books as being the first ownership group to run the Paynos GTR1, that front-engine monster in GT1 at Le Mans. And I guess it kind of made me think, I'm never going to be a real-life Le Mans team owner. But if I become a sim team owner, at least it only costs the entry fee. Obviously, the price of graphic design for the livery, etc. But also, I get to drive, and I'm going to be honest. I'm not. I've just taken delivery of my Thrustmaster, my steering wheel and pedals, so I'm not going to get to any kind of level to be competitive in semi-pro or pro esports racing, probably ever. But Race for a Cause 24 is something that is designed to be entered into by, proper crack drivers like yourself, but also noobs like me who maybe start something a few months before and get into it. It has happened before. I know that Garnet and Adelaide trained up together so that Adelaide could race together with Garnet in the first Race for Cause 24. And that's the kind of vibe I'm going for. I'm hoping to put together a motion racing sim team with 2 other drivers who are going to be much better than me, I hope. And I just really want to see a purple GT3 hit the track. But Georgie, as someone who entered with Prismatic Motorsports and has turned it into this snowballing behemoth that it is now, what tips have you got?
So the first thing I would say is don't do it. But anyway, now that that's out of the way, honestly, the very first thing I would say to you is brave of you to assume that you're going to do a 24-hour race with just 3 of you. If you're only into it a few months, fuel tank will last about an hour depending on what you're driving, and that's a very, very long time to stay consistent and focused, especially when you're first getting into it. And that's not to say that people aren't capable of doing that. They absolutely are. But when you're changing the goalposts from, okay, I have to do, if you say do a 3-hour endurance race, which is relatively, or a 2-hour endurance race, which are relatively commonly run every week in iRacing, you might do that with another driver and you'll do 1 hour each. And that's not really that tiring. Whereas in Road to a Cause, there were a bunch of us doing the whole race solo. It was a 4-hour race. It was incredibly tiring. And that's 4 hours in a row. And you probably wouldn't do that unless you were some kind of sicko. I'm probably going to end up doing that at some point in the Daytona 24 because I just love driving the LMP2 at Daytona at night. It's one of the best experiences in sim racing. But you're going to be very tired running three of you. I'd definitely say look for a 4th driver for the 24. 4 is a really good number for 24 hours.
Yeah, and the other thing is, this is all very early days in the planning stages, and it might be that I end up going in the same direction that Noel Edmonds did, which is Noel started that documentary saying, maybe I can drive, and, he went off for a test with Derek Bell, and the conclusion was, you can't drive. So I think maybe getting 3 or 4 top-class drivers in and just being the person on the radio, being the team spotter, being the team principal, might be more my bag, but let's see.
Well, there's plenty of opportunities to do that, and to drive as well. If I remember correctly, there wasn't a driver fair share rule in the last Race for a Cause, so there'd probably, if you didn't want to, say if you wanted to enter a motion racing podcast team and you had a bunch of more confident drivers and you wanted to be their pit wall for the race, that would be fine. But I'm absolutely certain we could find a team that would be happy to put you in the car for an hour or something just to get you on the track and give you that experience if you wanted to. It's it's a very friendly environment in that championship, in that race, in that series.
I'm absolutely sure. I just couldn't bear the thought of bending someone else's car against the wall. I would much rather enter my own car, and then at least it's on me. It's my accountability. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, but it's a digital car, isn't it? At least you don't have to worry about paying the insurance.
True enough. That's maybe one of the attractions of sim racing. I've got to circle back to someone you mentioned very quickly. Izzy Matthews, of course, won the first Road to a Cause 2026 race. Also raced to begin with as part of a driver pairing, later on solo for the Prismatic team in British F4 Esports. Izzy raced solo as well in Road to a Cause. That wasn't something that Izzy had to do. It was something that I think she chose to do. And psychologically, it must have been draining. But yeah, she didn't seem in the interviews to express any of that. She just said, I had plenty to drink during pit stops. I was fine. I assume she meant water. Must have been a hell of a massive Stanley Cup there, but still.
I think it's actually a bit of a joke about me because I put the car in the wall trying to have a drink at one point. I very lightly grazed the tire barrier, I will say, and I completely got away with it. But at one point, I definitely remember being like, "Oh God, no!" Because I was taking a drink from a bottle of Coke or legally distinct Coke. And I thought I'd turned the wheel enough on the back straight, but to clear that little kink. But I'm like, oh, there's a wall, and I was very very close to saving it, but I just couldn't quite make it. But no, back to Izzy. Izzy,
I think, by the way, I think in the trade that's called Webbering it, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I Webered it. You're absolutely right. But to get back to Izzy, who isn't a bad driver, we were in a voice chat together for the whole race, me and Izzy and some of our other drivers as well. Our community entry, Matty Cridland, was in the voice chat with us as well. Some of the teams that were not soloing, say Scout and Cassandra, they were off separately. Ivory and Shuggy were off separately, but we were all just pretty much vibing in the voice chat with each other, keeping each other company because we were soloing. And that's always been one of the things that I've been most impressed with Izzy, is just her mentality. She can take a bad situation and make it sound like there's a rainbow, and she'll make the best of it, whatever comes. And generally, she'll come out pretty well as well. The Race for a Cause last year, she was on the podium for that. As I say, she was technically our reserve driver for British F4, but ended up running more rounds of that series than either of our did. And
yeah, and so British F4 Esports is a proper championship. It's put on for example, the junior teams of Formula One esports teams to put out drivers. There are also some very, very high level independent teams such as Team Bennett, which won the championship, and Prismatic's up against all of those. And the thing that most impressed me last season, and that there were some giant killing performances in 24, 25 not so much, but what did impress me was the way Izzy just took the car by the scruff of the neck and kept giving it to the bigger teams. She obviously won some points just through pure tenacity, didn't she?
Absolutely. As I say, Izzy just always seems to put herself in the right headspace, and especially in championships like that where you're driving against drivers the caliber of Henry Moore. Henry Moore, the driver that won the championship in British F4, funnily enough, also went on to win the global FIA F4 championship. One of the best drivers in sim racing at the moment, if not the best F4 driver, based on the fact that he just won the global title for it. And that's the kind of driver that she was up against. And this was the first esports series of this caliber that Izzy had been thrown into, and the way that she dealt with it, as you say, you can't come through a series like that without getting your elbows out a little bit when you need to, if you want to get any points in it. And that's one thing that Izzy was pretty good at, was giving as good as she got. And as you say, that's something I was incredibly proud of and was really good to watch across the season, was her find her confidence in the car. And then by the time we got to Knock Hill, it was her holding her line against some really, really fast drivers and some really, really top-level teams. It was just fantastic to see. And the same again, that's just what we've come to expect from Izzy of a Sunday or a Saturday or whenever she puts her hands on a wheel. We're just expecting fantastic things. And to be fair, Yesterday's result was, I would say, maybe slightly influenced by issues for the Queen's design team, but I think she'd have won anyway. I'm going to be honest, I do. She had the sauce yesterday. That's all I can say.
And I think anyone who can win a 4-hour endurance race by themselves has the respect of me, and I'm sure of everyone who was watching yesterday. But Georgie, thank you so much. I'm going to try and get Izzy on a future edition of this podcast because, great person to talk to as well. But thank you. Really looking forward to hearing more about how you do at Daytona. And hope it goes well for you and the team as well.
I just hope it goes better than my spa. My spa does not bear talking about, but I keep bringing it up.
Well, my spa has a hot tub and a pool, so you're going one better than me.
To be honest, that sounds so much better than what happened to me that weekend. I just put the car in the wall twice, completely unforced. It was a really bad weekend for me. I wasn't feeling that well, to be fair. Not to put any excuses down to it. It just was not a good drive for me. So we're hoping for better at Daytona.
Well, thank you for listening to the Motion Racing Podcast. You can follow us on all good podcast platforms and now on YouTube as well. Really looking forward to hearing your feedback on this. And next time we'll be looking a bit more closely at sports car racing, both sim and in real life. And we hope very much that you'll join us then. Thank you so much.